Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. My name's Jimmy. I work for Skiddle. We're here, as I'm sure you're all aware, because we've recently done a study into the mental health of music promoters. It was kind of an idea that was started by someone in the office who was a music promoter and thought that that there was a bit of a prevalent problem within the industry. And then we did the study and realised that it was a much bigger, in fact, quite staggeringly so, bigger issue than we had all envisaged. So tonight is the second of two panels that we've been doing. We did one in London yesterday evening. We've assembled quite a varied team of experts to discuss the findings and kind of what we can do about it and how we can make things better. So I will let the panel introduce themselves. So John, if you could start, and then we moved up.
Hi everyone, this is working. Thank you for coming. I love being in Manchester. There's more people here than some of the gigs I've put on. So well done, Skiddle. Better promoter than me. So my name's John Rostron. I used to be a promoter. I stopped earlier this year. I sold my company. And I promoted concerts in Cardiff, which is where I used to live. I live in North Wales now, running shows from small venues with 50 people up to the biggest space in our town, which was a city, which was an arena. And I also ran a few festivals, including a festival called Soon Festival, which is like a multi-venue new music festival, which is a bit similar to your brilliant Off the Record, which happens here, which I love coming to. I've given that up so that I can set up a new organisation called the Association of Independent Promoters. This is the first time I've ever spoken about it publicly, thanks to Skiddle, so we'll talk more about that later. I run the Welsh Music Prize, because I'm Welsh. I'm not Welsh. I live in Wales, but I live there so long that I'm Welsh. That's what happens. So I run that with my friend Hugh Stevens. I'm a national advisor to the Arts Council of Wales, and I'm currently working with a company called Sound Diplomacy, and we're writing a music strategy for Cardiff City Council, where I used to live. That's me.
I'm DJ Paula. I've been DJing since 1991. Started off at the Hacienda and have travelled all over the world. Lived in France, I've lived in Ibiza, I've lived in London, and at the same time as being a DJ, I've also run some very small parties to varying degrees of success or not. And now I'm in Manchester, moved back to Manchester, and I'm still playing, still DJing, still playing parties in big places, in little places, in bars, restaurants, and clubs.
Hello everyone, my name is Tarani Chandola. I'm a professor here at the University of Manchester, and most of my work, most of what I research is about work stress and how stress can have this really adverse effect on your health and your biology, on your well-being. So when Jimmy here got in touch about the survey and I read the results, I was really surprised because some of the numbers, the statistics are really shocking. So I was very happy to come on and talk about it on this panel.
My name's Chiara. I work for Manchester Mind. I work on the youth project. I do advice for people who are under 25. So we'll talk a bit more about how I'll be able to help people in the future. But we are a charity, a mental health charity based in Hume and in Levenshume. I'll talk a bit more about how we can help. Okay,
great stuff. So you can find any of the findings of the study that we're talking about if you go to skiddle.com/mental-health. But in case any of you haven't done that, what I'll do is I'll just read out some of the kind of the top end findings that we've had. So the most obvious and staggering statistic is that over 80% of the people working in the music industry are suffering with consistent levels of stress, anxiety and depression. 82% of our respondents said they'd suffered with stress, 67% said they'd suffered from anxiety, 40% have battled depression, and then 1 in 10 had felt that they'd developed obsessive compulsive disorder as a direct consequence of their work within music. 65% of promoters said they frequently felt an intense and unimaginable level of pressure. Almost half, at 47%, said their work in music often led to a constant feeling of anxiety and sadness. And then nearly 4 in 10, so 38%, said working in promotions had affected their relationships with their partner and their spouse. A similar figure, 37%, said they frequently have financial problems which contributes feelings of stress, anxiety and depression. which is a massive kind of like, encouragement for all of you to go out and start promoting your own events. But despite all this, 36% of promoters said that they can imagine themselves working within the industry for at least another 1 to 5 years. So it's not this idea that it's all doom and gloom. People are still really passionate and want to carry it in. That said, nearly 1 in 3 said that they frequently feel like they're spoken to in an unacceptable way as a consequence of the work that they do. That could be from punters, from agents, which was a consistent theme, other promoters, and so on. And then the kind of things that they said that were the most thing that bothered them about working within music promotions, 45% said no regular income, 42% said the lack of support, and then 25% said the effect that it had on their relationships. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we've discovered by doing this study in terms of how music promoters feel that, the negative consequences on both their mental and their physical health. So with that in mind, I'm going to open this to anyone on the panel who wants to think. What's kind of your response to hearing that or reading that for the first time? Go first, Ronnie.
Yeah, sure, shall I go ahead? That 80% statistic is really high. When I had a look at that comparable numbers from other industries, other occupations, and usually it's around, the 20-30% of workers that say that their work is really, too much, too stressful. But 80% is like almost 3 times that number. So that was one number that really shocked me. And the other number that kind of shocked me, I know you said 37% say that they want to keep working in the industry for at least 1 to 5 years. But that's quite low as well. when you look at other jobs and in sectors, usually it's at least double that. So these are covered, 2 kinds of...
Is there an industry that compares, or are we the leaders of depression and miserableness?
Generally, PR work is pretty stressful. Yeah, so public relations work is, and in that sense, music promotion is kind of similar. But I think I haven't seen statistics for public relations that are quite as bad as this. Yeah, so.
Okay. And John, as a promoter who incidentally is given up promotion, has that anything to do with these findings? No. But how does that make you feel? Is that something that you can relate to after your time working in the music industry as a promoter?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the contributing factors to why I sold up my company and why I wanted to set up this association. So a couple of years ago, while I was an active promoter, I just began to question some of the things that were happening as a promoter. How many people are here are promoters, by the way? Okay. Who is everybody else then? What are you? Are you the audience? I'm really interested. There's not many promoters. What are you? Are you fans, musicians? So you might put on musicians, venues? Okay. So musicians who might also want to put on their own gigs or understand like why they're paying for towels at a show. But yeah, I was like working as a promoter, but there was also things that I began to kind of question. I was looking at what was going on. Actually, it started with my emails. I had so many emails, and I was questioning, like, I must be a failure because I can't answer all my emails and I can't get to my other work. And I did a lot of reading around management skills and technology and tools. I introduced systems, and I got my emails down and down and down, but I still had this like ongoing thing. And then I suddenly had this epiphany one day, having done all of this reading. I think it took about 6-7 months, and changing tools and techniques, and realized actually no, the volume of work is wrong. It doesn't equate to the job, and actually not even job. That's wrong. You're talking about work, and like a lot of people say here, they're not really earning money from it. And I began to get this kind of wider perspective. I got into music because I really liked putting bands on, trying to bring them into my hometown. It wasn't my job, it was just something I did for fun. And then I kind of looked at where I was now and went, well, I'm still bringing these acts in, but I'm not enjoying it anymore. And although it was my living, it's not a living. Like I could earn, at that time I realized I could step out and do something else and earn a lot more money without all the stress. And somewhere along the way it's gone wrong. So I thought, I met with some promoters at the Great Escape a few years ago in the back of a pub, 4 of us, 5 of us, and we began to talk together, and then over time began to realize that this was a real problem, and thought, well, if I close my company, actually if I close my company, two things will happen. One, I'll have the time to tackle this. And secondly, as your results incredibly say, I won't feel like if I stick my head up, I'll get attacked by whoever's out there. And so it was a contributing factor. And to realise that lots of people were in that position where they were feeling, I mean, your survey is incredible because we'll go through this, I guess, but the responses are things that I've been hearing from some of the people I've been speaking to. But I've spoken to like maybe 30, 40 promoters, you've spoken to 400. But there's an absolute sort of pattern of problems that we should be tackling.
I think that brings us to an interesting point. Obviously, there must be something unique about music promoters which creates this kind of environment where, you know, if we're talking about Tirana, you're saying it's 2 or 3 times as many people experiencing mental health problems as an average industry. And yeah, I've not thought that, 36% say they want to continue working in the industry. That's 64% that want to get the fuck out ASAP, isn't it? So that's the flip of that statistic. And so this is a panel again to anybody. Sorry, a question to anyone on the panel. What is it about a music promoter that is so unique, which makes these issues so much more prevalent than perhaps in other industries or jobs? Do you want to go?
I think from my point of view, in terms of promoters and promoting, it's even though those statistics are high, it's actually part of the job to be that stressed and full on and competitive. That is something, it's part of what drives people to put on the parties, to do well, to go bigger, to go bolder, to dream as big as he can. It's as with any creative, that kind of stress and anxiety is part and parcel of what you do. It's how you deal with that stress. And I think for promoters, it's a little bit like, from what I've seen and from what I've experienced, it can be a little bit like cockfighting and posturing, where you're going up against someone who is equal to you and you want to be seen to be bigger than them so you can get better relationships with artist managers, booking agents, that kind of thing, and for your party to be bigger and just to get the names. So I think it's a bit like that. Maybe it's not.
Yeah, I think that like the live music industry, which is what I know better than the sort of club night thing. I started in club nights actually, but it's just a really strange world. So for example, like, I didn't buy this pint, by the way, thank you, Andy, but if any of you bought a drink, you went to the bar and it was a certain price, right? It's £2.95. What is it in Manchester for a pint? £3 for a pint, right? If you go to an agent, I'm not picking on agents, but as an example, you go to an agent for a band, there isn't a fee. If you're it's not like, oh, it's £500. It's a negotiation that starts somewhere. If you say you're a festival, the fee's suddenly 10 times what you might pay for a night. What a starting point, right? You don't even know where you begin.
Because it's based on the amount of people that come through the door, the amount of tickets that can possibly be sold, how much a percentage of that total take can be apportioned to each artist in a hierarchical order of who's bigger on the lineup and not.
Yeah, in an absolutely maniacal, crazy order that you just can't, nobody can actually give you a formula and understand. And when you speak to other promoters, you'll find that you've paid £5,000 for an artist and they paid 10,000 and they're on a Wednesday and you're on a Thursday. And I did I've done tours where one artist, between the shows that I spoke to, and we're not allowed to, the artist, the fees ranged in, somebody was paying £3,000 and somebody was paying £11,000 for the same artist in roughly the same capacities within 10 days of each other. Yeah. That's nuts. Yeah. Imagine going to the bar and negotiating your pint. Right?
Well, that's exactly
what a starting point for a thing. Whereas hopefully the jobs, generally with jobs, there's a fee and there's a price and there's a structure and there's some kind of formula that you can understand. And that's like, in terms of live, that's your starting point. I've got a friend who recently really loved the band Ice Age. I shouldn't perhaps say any of these things, but they're not a promoter, they just really wanted to bring Ice Age to their city. They phone up and there's not a fee, there's just a figure. And it's just nuts. And then at the other end, the person then dictates what the price is going to be for the ticket, and they could dictate what the marketing spend is going to be, and then they send you a rider that's going to cost you more than the gross of the entire show, and so on and so forth. So the whole industry is just like really oddly built. That's my view of it anyway. And that's nobody's fault in particular, it's just how it's all come about, and nobody's looked to try and make it a bit more normal.
And then by the same score, you go through that whole process of negotiating a deal with someone, and I was talking to Jimmy before, and then your party is going to be, say, next week, and then you'll find out that another promoter in the city has done a favour price with the same DJ who's not on the bill, they're doing it as a special guest, and they fucked your party because they brought someone in a week before your party and has just basically put a red line through your door take. So that kind of cutthroat, one promoter putting one over on another without thinking how it's going to affect the livelihoods of however many people that you're employing, that you're responsible for. Because as a promoter, I suppose the difference between mental health issues for a creative and a DJ, and the difference between mental health issues for a promoter is a DJ is responsible for, okay, the people in front of them, but mainly themselves. The promoter's responsible for themselves, the team, the DJ, all the techies, all the marketing and everything. It's going through this one person, so the level of stress, you can multiply it by 100. So, yeah, that's how I see it.
It's quite an interesting point. There's one, I'm going to go a little bit off tangent here for an example, but there's one sport which has a real problem with mental health, and that's cricket. But it's more often than not, it's batsmen that have mental health problems, and that's because when you're a batsman, you've got 11 people trying to get you out, like 11 people all against you. When you've got bowlers, you've got fielders, you've got a team, and there's a lot of other factors that kind of come in because you're away from your family for long periods of time and stuff. But if you're a music promoter and you have your peers constantly attacking you and trying to fuck you over and outdo you, I mean, that must really wear you down mentally. I mean, Tarani, is that something you've seen mirrored in other industries?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it sounds like, hearing you guys as well as reading through the survey, that the level of competition is so fierce, and you have all these responsibilities, but you don't have any control over so many things. There's so much uncertainty about that. And so definitely when you have that, it's a toxic combination of having so many responsibilities, but so little control over that. And, it's perhaps not quite at the same levels in some other industries, but you do have a few other jobs where the levels of stress are really high, mainly because of this toxic combination of lots of responsibilities, no control, so much uncertainty.
And I would say as well, say you're doing a promoter's put on a festival, for a DJ playing at a festival, if it rains, so what? Someone might put a bit of tarpaulin down, you might play, you might not play, but it's only going to affect your fee. For a promoter, if it rains, it's a big deal, and you cannot control the weather. There are so many other determinants about how your business plan can suddenly turn to absolute liquid by the weather. Just a simple thing as, is it too hot, too cold, too whatever, makes a massive difference to your bottom line.
Chiara, I want to bring you in the conversation at the end, sorry. So obviously you're listening to this now and you're hearing these things in it, but how, as someone who works, as a helpline for people with mental health problems, how are these discussions making you feel, and what do you think can be done to help these promoters?
I think looking at the report and talking to these guys tonight shows that while the problems within promoting in the music industry is quite unique, the stresses just seem unbelievable. The hours worked, the company that you have to keep, all that sort of stuff is quite unique to this industry. The problems that it brings up are common to all industries and to all people as well. So promoters might find that, they get paid a lot at one time and they don't have any money for a while, so they need help with budgeting, they might run up some debts, they find that they can't get out of their overdraft, or they owe the same people money all the time and they just need help with that. Or they might find that at the weekend they're constantly taking certain drugs around certain people at business meetings and things. There's lots of things that then the problems that they bring up are common in mental health in the industry. So we would help with things like debts, things like budgeting, help with drug support, things like that. I think a lot of the time when you're in a situation that is a cocktail of different toxic stressors, like we're saying, it's hard to see that all these things can be broken down and that you can get help for all these little things. But the first step is knowing where to go to access that help.
I think that brings an interesting idea as well, because obviously music promotions, you know, a lot of people that start putting on parties do it because they want a party. You know, as simple as that. They want, want all their friends to come and they want to do something really cool and exciting and, a bit of music. And then obviously the lines get blurred between when it's a party and when it's a professional, and that must be quite a difficult balance for, promoters to kind of have. So again, this is to anyone in the panel. How do you navigate that? How do you make that choice where you do something kind of for the love and from a passionate point of view, but you manage to make it work financially and with as little detriment to your health?
I suppose I'm a bit of a bad example for that, because the times I've tried to promote parties and I've done it out of my own pocket, I've ended up really seriously out of pocket, and the reason that I've stopped doing it is because I had to draw a line under it and say, yeah, I'm really enjoying this is something I believe in, but financially this is suicide, I need to stop. And that's why I've kind of gone back into playing parties for other people until I can get to that position again where I can start to launch my own parties again. It's a massive financial responsibility putting on a party, and if you haven't got that kind of support network behind you for 2 months occasional loss, it only takes 3 parties to, it only takes 3 months salary for anybody in any job to start really seriously losing money. Even if you work at the co-op and you don't earn for 3 months, it's a serious problem. For a promoter where your money is, your earnings are erratic, 3 months of no money is a disaster. So.
I think as well, it's not just with promoters as well. It's not just like a month's wages. We're talking 5 figures sometimes, aren't there? And that can be quite a crippling thing. I'm going to read out some of the findings or some of the comments rather that people have said. So we asked promoters what the things that bothered them the most were. So agents came up, various swear words attached to the word agent at different junctures. Other promoters being aggressive, talking about monopolies, having drunk and drugged up punters, giving them grief. Someone else had put that they received death threats because they cancelled a free event. One thing that was quite interesting as well, which we didn't actually have time to discuss last night, so it'd be interesting to do it now, is a couple of the comments focused on social media and how damaging that can be. One of them was the obvious that you will get lots of negative feedback and stuff, and being able to hear horrible things from people. But the second was the amount of time having to spend on social media. Obviously, there's a lot of studies being done, which are separate to this at the moment, in how social media is damaging the mental health of children, and that how spending too much time on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and so on can be damaging to your mental health. So, how promoters, you cannot promote a club night or a live music event or festival, any event of any sort, without spending a huge amount of time on social media. So how damaging is that going to be for promoters?
I think it's particularly damaging because a lot of the time, particularly when you're doing it on a small scale, is say you're promoting a party through Facebook, everybody clicks like, you've got 800 likes and you think 800 people are going, and then you put your party on and you get 20 people through the door. People are too polite when you send out an invite to say no, which you really want people to do. You want people to honestly say whether they're going to go or not, because you're trying to do maths and work out a business plan based on how many people have clicked on like and that they're going. So when you get that disparity between who you think is going to come and who actually turns up, it's crushing. Like, all of a sudden, you're not the most popular kid in the school. It's like you've got flies farting in your club.
I think there's two sides to it that you mentioned. There's promoting the event. I think time spent on social media promoting event is really worthwhile. But then there's also the listening to the other voices. And that's the damaging bit, and that's the hard bit. Because quite often, again, if we go back to this, probably like most of you in the room, you're promoters because it's not your living, it's not what would I be right in saying? It's a hobby or it's a passion. And if you're an artist, you might be either wanting to put on your own shows to just play and promote what you do, or you want other promoters to be around that care about what you do. And for most people, that's a hobby, right? It's stuff they do in their spare time. So you care about the artist or you care about the thing, and you know that, you're not thinking about the money, and as long as you break even or you don't lose too much, or if you make a bit, it's okay. And then you put yourself on social media, and then all the things that you've thought about or not thought about, everybody's got an opinion. Imagine if I got you all to speak now about this event and tell me what you liked or didn't like about it. Oh, I think it's too dark. I wish you hadn't worn that jumper. You know what I mean? Why are two blokes sitting next to each other? Why isn't it one man, one woman? Why isn't there gender equality? Do you know what I mean? Why is there a guy from Wales? Right? And then you hear that in the thousands, and it's really upsetting, because quite often those people are putting the show because they really fucking love the band. They really want the band to come to their town, or the DJ. They're doing it for fun, and they didn't ask for all this shit, and they can't help but hear it. And we haven't worked our way through social media yet to work out what that etiquette or what the law is. So everybody has a say, and unfortunately on that end you get to hear it, and it really fucking hurts, and it's hard. And there's nothing we can do about it until hopefully what happens is a generation grows up and learns the protocol of. We learnt it with social etiquette. We don't walk up to each other and go like, "You look like a bit of a cunt," right? I don't. Yeah. Hi, Manchester. But we haven't learnt that on social media, and so we're having a field day, aren't we?
Yeah, and everyone seems to be like.
Sorry, was that streamed? And I said.
Like a keyboard warrior, where at the end of an event where you think you've done really well, and I'm thinking of one particular one that I saw on Facebook recently, and people launched into a tent, an area of this festival, and it was relentless, it was hateful. What people responded to after a festival that went over a weekend that saw probably 80,000 people go through the doors. Most of them were happy, but to read what people had to say about it in the end was quite frightening, and frightening in a way that people seem to think these days when they make comments like that on social media, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, that the person behind who's put this party on seems to be a robot or something that doesn't feel anything when you insult them for their choices. I'm sorry, but we're people, and people seem to forget when they're replying to this and having the great ideas after the event because somebody else has put the party on for them and they feel they can comment, is that you're talking to a person behind this, and they will go away, and it's almost impossible not to take some of it personally. It's impossible, we're not unfeeling beings. So if someone says, "Oh, I thought that party was really shit," it's like, "Oh, okay, one person said it," that will bounce off. But when you get it off 100 people or 100,000 people, then it starts to matter, and it's not that funny.
I was talking to a promoter who called me a couple of weeks ago, and he was struggling through social media because somebody was calling out his company. There'd been a sexual assault at one of his gigs, or a gig that he was promoting. And they were everywhere talking about his brand name, his promotion's name, and that he was guilty of sexual assault and all this. And it was absolutely nothing to do with him. He put a concert on, he'd done absolutely everything right, and in a venue where the venue had done absolutely everything that they legally required to do. And in a room with 500 people, there's a point when the person is fucking responsible for their actions, right? Right? And you've done everything that you can to make that safe place safe, and then something horrible has happened. And he was deeply upset by what had happened on the night. And then, you know, afterwards, he's then being accused of it. It's nothing to do with him personally, but he's being accused. His company's being accused, and he's being accused. And he's upset about what happened, let alone all this other stuff. And it was on social media, so he's having to deal with it. He's trying to talk to it. He's trying to meet the people. They won't meet with him. They won't talk, and it's carrying on. And it's just not. There's a point where it wasn't. In this case, it's not fair, and it led to him being in a really dark place. I don't know how you begin to tackle that.
No.
That was a really bad answer. He's like, just bringing everyone down.
I think after 40 minutes of a compendium of, you know, ever developing doom about music promotion, I think probably it's a good time for us now to kind of like talk about what we can do to change things. So obviously, one of the prevalent themes that we've kind of discussed tonight is, you know, this cutthroat industry and stuff like this, and, you know, almost a lack of a community. But obviously, hearing you speak, John, saying, you know, that you met with other promoters at the Great Escape and you've started up this initiative. Do you feel that, like, you know, something as basic as promoters just talking to each other and being nice is that a good enough thing to start moving in the right direction to tackle these issues?
Yes, absolutely. When we first had these meetings, I got together like 4 or 5 people, and then it went really well, and we said, let's have a bigger meeting, and between everybody put some names forward, and about 20, 25 of us met in Birmingham. And it was really interesting because different people, we tried to bring people from across the UK, but there were some people from the same town, and then they didn't talk to each other, right? Or there was things that they held back. And so I had to kind of get rid of some people to begin to kind of create this space where they could just talk. And what happened, turned out that some of them, you know, they might be in the South Coast, one might be in the North, and they were competitors. They would tread on each other's toes from time to time. But once we got them in a room and we were talking about what we're talking about, like, how can we make it better? How can we make it more fun? How can we get rid of, I mean, for the promoters, how can we get rid of versus deals? How can we get rid of ticket counts? Why are we putting towels in the budget? Why is the rider so big? How can we get rid of all this shit that we all hate? And we just go back to the fun. All of the rivalries, all of the competitiveness went away, and they all got into the room and they focused on the things that they shared and the things that they wanted to do and the reasons they got into music in the first place. And now that group have opened up this association of independent promoters, and they want to let everybody in. You know, the people that on a day-to-day basis that they want to be in a room with everybody because ultimately they care about the same things. They might go away and then fight over the same artist. They might plaster over each other's posters. But when they're in that room, they're all there for the same purpose. And that was really quick to happen. It took a couple of meetings, and there was a couple of rivalries that quickly got buried through being, you know, they just needed someone to bring them together and remind them why they were here. And in our case, it was a love of music, bands, that's particularly, you know, and that's actually what it was about. It wasn't about being angry all the time. So the competitiveness, it's interesting that you talked about it a bit. Like, in this group already, we don't have that. We don't have that there isn't a cutthroatness. Sometimes there's a honest competitiveness, but even that's quite, I don't know. There's a lot of already people going, do you know what? Well, we'll just work together. It's really good.
I mean, there's enough space for everybody, isn't there, I think, with the music industry and stuff. So, yeah.
I think it's people getting their heads around that, really, that there is room for everybody, and there isn't really that need to be so vicious or cutthroat or mercenary about your dealings, one with another and one with another booking agent. And also to understand, the more they push the price up, the more difficult it makes it for absolutely everyone. So
there's loads of you artists. There's loads of great artists, more than ever in the history that I've been promoting. And either artists need to be empowered and able to put your own shows on and know what you need to do it, or you need somebody who's going to do it with you or for you.
You need backing.
And the promoters at the top of that food chain, because it is a food chain, the SJMs, the Live Nations at the top, they need all of you guys. They need great artists. They need great grassroots promoters working on helping you find your space. They need great venues to hone your skills, find audiences, do those shows, so that eventually they've got a business at the top. And as a community in Manchester or wherever, audiences want great things to happen. And those things, I mean, you go down a high street, you don't get one shoe shop, you get all the shoe shops together, because that's what makes a good shoe shop, right? That's how retail works. You go to that one place and you know you can find everything, and you can shop around if you want, but you're going to find the thing that you need. And that's the same with bands and clubs and so on. You need that buzz, and the buzz doesn't come from like one person being alone, it comes from a big community. That's my view on it anyway.
So Kiara, obviously you help people with mental health problems through your role, and personally you're involved in the music industry as well, aren't you, to a degree. So what do you think kind of positive steps do you think that we as promoters and people that are working with promoters can take, you know, to move things in the right direction?
I liked what John was saying about having a community, and I think I'm not up on technology, right, but I know that it can be good, and that you can have online forums, chat groups and stuff. Is that what they still call these days, chat rooms? So you could have like a online peer-to-peer support stuff. Manchester Mind themselves have an online group, but they also have physical groups as well, and they work really well for people to get together. And if it was just promoters or certain parts of the music industry all getting together talking about stuff, you can talk about these things together. You could even anonymise it as well, so you're not knowing that it's the other bad guy, that, you know, from the same city and stuff. You can make it anonymous. There's lots of technology out there where you can sort of mess about with these sort of things. But I think getting people to open up to each other in the same industry would be good, but also accessing that support like what we do. We also have a mentoring scheme which is really popular. So I work for the Youth Project, and we work with 25 and unders, and we have a mentoring scheme. They generally volunteers who've used the service, and then they go on and mentor somebody else with a mental health problem, and they help get them into work or just get them doing stuff that they otherwise can't do on their own. It's a really good idea, and I think maybe that would work. Like you say, it's all about building a community, and it's how you do that. And now we can do it nationally. It doesn't have to be locally.
This is maybe to you and Palette and John. Do you think that there's enough awareness for promoters starting off of the pitfalls? I know in my job, I tend to see promoters making the same mistakes. You'll get like a new green promoter, and they'll book a DJ that they think's really good, but nobody else does. And you'll see these kind of repeat things. And do you think that there's enough literature and content within the media that's accessible for people, or do we need to do more about that?
It's exactly why we set this up. You know, no, there isn't. Oh God, the examples are so nuts. Like, you know, it's nuts. I can't begin to explain how crazy it is. You might be at a club night or a gig night, and loads of people are guilty of just going, well, there's 200 people in the room, it's £10 a ticket, £2,000, he's made £2,000, and without any understanding of everything that's gone into that show. And that happens, right? And I've been there, the promoter with £5 notes or £10 notes in a bag, walking out with like thousands of pounds in a bag, and people going, oh my God, right? But like without any understanding of the work that it took to get there, and actually that's all going to go into the bank and pay the band tomorrow or whatever. Sometimes it was great, sometimes it wasn't. It's nuts. And the industry is really guilty of it. And the examples are crazy. The examples of somebody, I wish I could remember the band name, because it's fucking great, calling, saying, I'm setting up a new festival in, wherever it was, it's somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Derby, that's where I was born. Derby, I want to book this band. What's the headline? Yes, the headline. Okay, it's £10,000 or whatever it was. The band were worth 70 tickets. The agent knew that they were worth 70 tickets, but the agent charged the person £10,000, some kid. And it was only a responsible other promoter, actually it was in Derby, that intervened and went, this is nuts, and intervened and talked to the agent and got everything changed. But the industry would have let that happen. Yeah. This poor kid would have put this festival on, was putting this festival on that nobody was going to buy tickets for, and would have been dead and buried at whatever it was, 21, 22. Who would do that, right? But the industry does, because the industry doesn't reward the agent that says, well, it's 500 quid. The agent doesn't get, the agent gets commission on 10 grand. It wasn't the agent's kind of fault. Kids, anyway, the stories. You need to get Ian Evans. He's the guy with the stories. For example, no, I can't do it, can I? Get Ian Evans to speak. The examples are crazy. Like an agent who once called somebody and said, I've seen the poster for your festival. This is a big festival. I've seen the poster for your festival. You didn't run the poster by us. And you go, what? Well, your act is down there. Yeah, but you didn't run the poster by us. Well, but your act's down there. Well, I tell you what, you pay me £1,000 and I won't tell the act that I'm unhappy with the position of the font of their act. Right? So this person paid the agent £1,000 so that the agent didn't tell the act that he was unhappy with the font on the poster. And a guy called Ian Evans, get him in, could do an hour of those stories. And it's nuts, like, but please promote shows.
I mean, we at the panel last night, we talked about the, does everybody know what happened with Jeremy Underground last year? Where the promoter revealed the emails, and I think it was like, I will fucking bite you, I will end you, various mafioso threats.
TLDR.
And one of the guys on the panel, the promoter's just like, oh, that just happens once or twice a week. Like, and then, he just says that's part and parcel of the job. So anyway, we're going down a little bit of a miserable route again, so let's bring it back in.
It's important to talk about these things because the problem is that if you're the promoter or the venue and you get those emails, who do you talk to?
Yeah.
And I'm not picking on, and they might come from anyone, but there's somebody I was with earlier who runs a really reputable venue, and they got an email saying such and such an artist has changed agent. Oh no, I can't say too much. Let's just say they've changed agent, just to let you know. By the way, if you ever book any of their artists into your venue, I'll never work with you again. And that went to every single venue that agent had worked with on that artist. And those things happen all the fucking time.
Yeah,
I don't like swearing.
Tarani, obviously within your work, you've studied different industries and stress levels. What positive changes have people made within these other industries to combat, and what can we, as music promoters, learn from that?
So there are a few things that people can do by themselves. Yes, you try to eat well, sleep well, drink well, all of that stuff. But really, you want to change the industry. You want to change how people work. I really like the idea of getting an association, because you kind of need to talk about these things. Yeah, in order to make any sort of change, you need to talk, make them open, make people realize that all this awful stuff that's happening, and make sure that you talk amongst your peers. One of the best ways of changing working conditions is to start a union. Yeah. Now, okay, it might be a bit hard to start a union amongst people who are largely self-employed, who are really at competition with each other. But the very first step of getting an association done is amazing. So that's getting an association, getting people together, talking about it, and maybe forming some sort of union, or getting the literature out there, about getting knowledge out there that people can change things, by talking to each other, by forming some sort of association. Those are the key ways in which working conditions have improved.
Okay, great stuff. Is there any final points before I open up to the audience that anyone wants to mention?
I think we've been talking about it's really good to open up, and yes, it is. But one of the biggest issues, I think, with anyone opening up to anyone in this industry, whether you're an artist or a promoter or anything, is trust. You don't know who to trust. You don't know whether this information that you give, whether you're saying, oh, I feel really vulnerable, I've lost a load of money, or my head's absolutely done in, and I can't sleep, I can't eat. You don't know who you can actually say that to. Do you say it to a friend? You're limited. Are they going to talk to everyone? Is that going to bring you down? It's just, who do you talk? It's great saying that we can talk, and it is the thing we need to do, but who to?
Manchester Mind is who you can one last plug for Manchester Mind. So we are based in Hume, which is a short walk from the city. We also have a youth project in Levenshume. We can help with lots of different things. We have counsellors for under 25s. We have an advice team like myself. We can help with debts, financial problems, basically anything, all of your paperwork. And if we can't help you, we'll point you in the right direction. I think a lot of people think that accessing mental health support is about lying on a couch, pouring your heart out, which it can be, but it's also about saying, I've got this big gig coming up and it's doing my head in, I can't concentrate, I can't sleep, and we will help you deal with the things as you are ready to deal with them. It's not about getting everything off your chest at once, it's about doing little things at a time. So don't ever feel worried that you need to be ready to talk to someone. Just either go on our website, email us or call us and just say, I need help with this one thing, and we can start the conversation.
Great stuff. Okay. Has anyone got any questions they want to ask the panelists? Yeah?
Sorry, it's all right, I'll shout, I've got a big voice. You were saying about like for under 25s, but when you get over 25, you have like a lot more like responsibilities and like financial strains and mortgages, children. Like who could you kind of advise for after that?
Oh, sorry, so I wasn't clear. So Manchester Mind itself can help anyone. I'm on the youth project for under 25s, but yeah, they can help anyone above that. We have a counselling service, but it stops at age 25, but we know about other organisations that you can get counselling from and stuff like that. But all those things that you talk about, yeah, we could definitely help with.
And certainly, I think there's an issue as well, like you said, over 25 you've got other responsibilities. So, you know, anyone who's self-employed will find problems with getting a mortgage because your money is so erratic. You know, no bank will give a DJ or a promoter or an artist a mortgage these days, or even really let you rent an apartment. You know, you've got to literally prove so much about your financial background these days. So what help you know, where can people go to get advice or help on those kind of things? You know, it needs to be made clear that there are these avenues where people can go and sit down and work out how they're going to afford to live in a particular place. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah, but also, like, we found in our early days of the association that through just sharing, some of the promoters didn't realise that the flip side of that is that any records that you buy, any gigs that you pay to go to, your bus fare, your train fare, your clothes, all of these you can put off your tax. Now, so you don't do it, they're not looking for tax avoidance, but there's all these things that they do. They read books, they buy magazines, and they didn't realise the haircuts, and that doesn't apply to me, but they could... a
percentage.
Yeah, they could put a percentage off, and suddenly it was
Not
like, oh wow, that makes a big difference to my tax bill at the end of the year. So we're going to run some seminars and workshops about that, because you know there's just things that come about that you it's really hard to find in isolation. You can't know it all, and you only will learn it, like you said, from talking to other people and sharing information and learning about what works for the people and what deals are being done.
Okay, anyone else want to ask a question?
Andy Manchin from Antwerp Manchin. I'm not exactly, I don't think I need a microphone. I'm not exactly going to ask any questions, I'm going to make a few points. I think. Fine, go on to use that as well. Firstly, I don't know what this organisation or association that you're talking about is, because it wasn't mentioned on the literature or the email that I received, and we arrived just a little bit late, so I might have missed the instructions, so apologies for that. What you seem to be talking about is exactly how we ran Antwerp Manchin, where promoters actually work together rather than working against each other, because that's the way that I set the organisation up, and I wouldn't have it any other way, because I wouldn't give them dates in my calendar unless they were talking to each other, because competing within my venue was destructive. Some of the things that you talked about mental health, I've seen, and I absolutely know, because you're in a very, very competitive industry where there is no training and no qualification to enter. You simply have to be good at what you do. So if you seem enthusiastic, bright, cheerful, and I like you, then you get a booking in my calendar, and you can completely fail. The things that you're talking about workshops and structure and so on, about what you can claim on your taxes and things like that. Well, I've been in business for 30 years, so I know these things. That's an accountant's job, but I agree with you. A lot of the people that come into this business have absolutely no idea about business whatsoever. They just want to put some music events on and enjoy themselves. And then suddenly, if they succeed, they find that they get a euphoric return from putting on a successful event, and then the drugs usually follow. And I think the drugs, which you mentioned, have got a lot to do with the downturn, because if you get into them too much, then your next event might struggle or you might fail, and then you go downwards into a spiral. So I don't know what you're talking about in terms of an organisation or an association, but I like the sound of it, because it sounds like basically collective bargaining. You're not talking about, you mentioned something that sounds like a trade union. You did mention something that sounds like a trade union. I don't actually think that's necessarily what you need, but collective bargaining is good because that's what we used to do. And agents, I wish they had been represented at this meeting as well, because there's a reason why they are snakes. The reason that they are snakes is because normally their clients have a 1 or 2 year shelf life.
Yeah.
My New Lane, for example, played Antwerp Mansion 2, maybe 3 times. They're doing another big gig in Bristol. I was talking to some guys that I'm booking their club out in Bristol. They could be faded and gone in another year or so. So if they demand 5 or 10,000 or 15 or 20,000 for an appearance, that might be because they've got 1 or 2 years and they're done. The agents in general suffer from the same mental health problems that the promoters do, because they're on a high and a low and a high and a low all the time. And if they don't get the right deal for their client, then they as agents could be gone. It's the same kind of cycle and same kind of problem. I agree with you that actually speaking to people and doing these things together and working so that we're all making something out of this, but it's not unfair to anybody, is right. But it's not necessarily the way that this game works, because it grinds people up and grinds people through. That's just the way that it works. If you could find a way where everybody's bumping along quite happily, that would be nice, but I don't think that's realistic, because people are going to look, I can't pay my mortgage next month unless I charge £10,000 for this gig. And if someone's willing to pay it, they'll take it. And if you, as your collective or your trade union or whatever, are not, they'll go with the person that is willing to do it. And there's always going to be people swimming around the edge of whatever you do. You don't agree?
No, I agree with all of you until the end. So the Association of Independent Promoters is somewhere... No, that's really good. The Association of Independent Promoters is a new organisation. This is the first time we've spoken about it publicly, because we've been talking to Skiddle through this process of me meeting with promoters and Skiddle being interested in the value for promoters. And it's not a trade union, it's a trade association in the same way that AIM is for music, if you release music, or the AIF, Association of Independent Festivals, is for festivals. I ran a festival, I was a member of AIF, and I became a board member of AIF, and that kind of led me into this Association of Independent Promoters. And it's a combination, it will be a combination of the value will be meetings and networking and sharing and just not feeling isolated and alone and learning about other practices and learning tips and tricks. It will be about, instead of you sticking up your head up and arguing or feel like you're arguing with somebody, whoever that is, about a fee or a price or a deal, it will be about an organisation being able to do that on your behalf and take that pressure away. It will be about collective bargaining, possibly, doing deals collectively, and collective lobbying. But ultimately, it's also about introducing workshops, best practice, and trying to introduce some new standards. And you brought something up, almost brought something up, or you made me think of something. So, for example, when you do a deal with a band, an agent, I don't know, like, for most people, this might be nonsense, you might not, but, like, there's versus deals. Have you heard of versus deals? Right? Which is where you pay the artist a set fee plus, or versus a percentage of the door. There's no standard. You might be doing a deal at versus 80%, but Paulette might be doing a deal at versus 70%, and you might be doing one at versus 90%. It's nonsense, right? So it's trying to, like, not nonsense, it's like trying to introduce that change. I don't agree that agents are snakes. That used to be what I felt, because I'd be getting those phone calls and those emails. There are some that are dicks. But there are some promoters who are dicks, right? And there's some artists that are dicks, and there's some people that are dicks. That's just life, right? Loads of agents I've met are really fucking great people. They're passionate about music, but they're under, you did say this, they're under their own pressures. They're responsible to a board and to shareholders. It doesn't matter about where the artist is in 3 years' time. It's about what the shares are worth in a year's time. And Courtney Barnett's on tour right now. So one of the last shows I booked was Courtney Barnett. She's touring in November. I booked it with one agent who's always been her agent. The tour's on sale. Midway through the tour, he's no longer their agent, her agent. And that's a brutal industry. So what do you expect that person to do next time they get an artist? They're going to screw the best deal they possibly can. And that's hard for agents, and it's hard for managers, and it's hard for record labels. So and agents, interestingly, they don't have a collective. They don't have a space where they can talk and share. They're all alone. I'm feeling sorry for them. So we've spoken to agents quite a lot about this, because what we want to do is make it better for promoters, make it better for artists, but we also want to make that relationship with agents or managers better as well. So that's kind of where we're going.
Okay, got time for one more question. Orange?
With the association for like promoters, will there be like an online service to get like quick fire advice to actually, if you've got like a particular problem and you want to ask someone for advice for that problem, will that be a service that you can provide?
Don't know, we're just building it. Yes, why not? Yeah, we're literally just building it. Like, we've had a meeting all this afternoon, talking with like some of the people that are founding it, and we're working out like those kind of things. So I don't know if it'd be an online service. I imagine somebody mentioned mentoring earlier. Yeah, like when I was at AIF, one of the things we introduced was mentoring, and in fact, I was the first person who had to be a mentor. And I mentored a small festival called Barn on the Farm, and they were going through this thing of like, I can't remember now, going from like 750 cap to 1500 cap. And that's like a big step when you're that point. It's a bit like when you're a promoter, you mentioned this before, when you're going from it being a hobby and then suddenly it's kind of becoming a job, that's the biggest step. The other big step is when you're not VAT registered to VAT registered. That's a fucking big step. It's not like, whoa, we could talk about that for an hour. It's like, whoa, fuck, shit, right? Game over, right? It's really bad. But mentoring is a brilliant thing. So I think as part of this, partly what we'll do is we'll have members meeting, and in a members meeting, you would be in a room, if you promote 10 shows a year, next to our biggest member is going to be Crosstown exclusive. Crosstown Concerts, who are a big national promoter, turnover like 20 million. So you'd be sitting next to them. So you could say, how do you do that? How do you do that? You know. So yeah, that would be the idea. You can pick up the phone, and there'll be a network of people that can hopefully help.
Jimmy, sorry, one more thing. 3 people before tonight, before I sat up here, said that they would have liked to take part in that survey as well. So I think what you were saying before about maybe it becoming a regular thing or another thing, I think it would be really good. I think a lot of people have responded well to it. I think it would be good.
Yeah, I think
I'm going to interrupt. I don't ever interrupt, but can we just say well done to Skiddle? Because it is a really isolating thing. There wasn't anybody out there to do it, and I think that Skiddle, you've spoken to so many people, and we've had a lot of response in the short time that we've been alive, and people asking to come. So can we hear it for Skiddle for just bringing that to the
I personally take all that credit myself. Thank you. No, I think this is something we're looking to become an annual thing, and we've been bowled over by how not only the amount of problems and stuff that's come from it, but the amount of interest and the appetite for wanting to change things. And I want to thank everybody for coming to the panel, and in particular all the panelists for speaking tonight. But thanks ever so much. Cheers, everyone.
I held you like a lover, happy hands, your elbow in the appropriate place.